6 minutes is barely enough time to boil water for tea. But on one ordinary afternoon, 6 minutes was all it took for a single person at a keyboard to plunge an entire nation into darkness. Imagine sitting in your living room when every light blinks out, your phone goes silent, and the hum of the modern world simply stops. What happens when one hacker finds the master switch to a country's power grid? This isn't a Hollywood thriller or a hypothetical war game. This is the story of what investigators call one of the most sophisticated cyberattacks ever launched against civilian infrastructure, targeting a nation's electrical grid through digital means alone. The attack didn't require missiles or soldiers, just code, patience, and an intimate knowledge of how power systems communicate with each other. The incident became a watershed moment in cybersecurity, proving that critical infrastructure once thought safe behind air-gapped networks could be reached, manipulated, and destroyed from thousands of miles away. What happened next would reshape how nations think about warfare, defense, and the invisible battlefield that exists in fiber optic cables and server farms around the world. The attack began months before anyone knew they were under siege. Investigators would later trace the intrusion back to a series of carefully crafted spear-phishing emails sent to mid-level employees at regional power companies. These weren't the crude Nigerian prince scams that flood our inboxes. They were perfect forgeries, mimicking real communications from trusted colleagues, carrying Microsoft Office documents that looked entirely normal. When the first employee opened the attachment, nothing dramatic happened. No alarm bells, no warning screens. The malicious code installed itself quietly, creating what security experts call a foothold in the network. Over the following weeks, the attackers moved laterally through the system like ghosts, studying the architecture, mapping the connections between substations, and identifying the critical control points that kept electricity flowing to homes and hospitals. The actual attack began in the early afternoon when most of the country was preparing for holiday celebrations. Operators at multiple power distribution companies watched in confusion as their cursors began moving across screens without anyone touching the mouse. The attackers had taken remote control, and they were clicking through the interface with the confidence of someone who had practiced this exact sequence dozens of times. One by one, circuit breakers opened at substations across a region serving more than 230,000 people. But the hackers didn't stop there. They deployed a second piece of malware designed to overwrite the firmware in critical systems, essentially bricking the equipment so operators couldn't simply flip the switches back on. The entire intrusion from initial access to power loss took approximately 6 minutes of active manipulation. When operators tried to call each other to coordinate a response, they discovered their phone systems were also under attack, flooded with automated calls that jammed the lines. The attackers had thought of everything. They wanted chaos, confusion, and maximum delay in restoration efforts. The forensic investigation that followed revealed the attack's sophistication through digital artifacts left behind in the compromised systems. Cybersecurity firm ESET recovered samples of the malware, which they named Black Energy, based on its code signatures. The malware contained modules specifically designed to target industrial control systems, particularly those running SCADA software common in electrical utilities. The United States Department of Homeland Security confirmed the attack through its ICS CERT division, publishing technical details to help other utilities defend themselves. Independent analysis by multiple security firms verified the same attack signatures and methodologies across all affected facilities. Ukrainian government officials publicly attributed the attack to Russian state-sponsored hackers, specifically citing the timing with ongoing geopolitical tensions. Russian government representatives denied any involvement, calling the accusations politically motivated. Western intelligence agencies later assessed with high confidence that the attack was conducted by a group tracked as Sandworm Team, believed to operate with state sponsorship. The physical evidence was equally compelling. Field technicians documented damaged equipment at substations, including serial-to-Ethernet converters that had been deliberately misconfigured to fail. Logs from backup systems showed the precise timestamps when remote commands were issued to open breakers. Not every cybersecurity expert agrees on every detail of the attack's execution and attribution. Some independent researchers questioned whether the initial access was solely through phishing emails, suggesting that insider access or supply chain compromise might have played an unreported role. The evidence for these alternative theories remains circumstantial, but the questions highlight gaps in the public record. The attribution to a specific nation-state also carries uncertainty, despite intelligence assessments. Cyber attacks allow for false flag operations where one group deliberately leaves evidence pointing to another. While the technical indicators and geopolitical context pointed consistently in one direction, absolute proof of state involvement remains classified if it exists. Some analysts also debated whether calling this a shutdown was accurate, given that backup manual systems allowed partial restoration within hours rather than days. The attack was devastating but not permanently crippling, leading to discussions about whether it was a test run, a warning shot, or an operation that achieved exactly its intended scale of disruption. Think of critical infrastructure like the circulatory system in your body. The heart pumps, vessels carry blood, and the whole system operates automatically without conscious thought. Now imagine someone could send signals to that system from outside your body, telling vessels to constrict or valves to close. That's essentially what happened here, except the body was an electrical grid and the signals were digital commands sent across the internet. The attack demonstrated what security professionals call living off the land, using legitimate administrative tools against themselves. The hackers didn't need exotic zero-day exploits or science fiction technology. They used remote desktop software, native Windows commands, and control interfaces that were supposed to make operators' jobs easier. The tools designed for convenience became weapons in the wrong hands. Question: how many of your essential services run on systems connected to the internet? This incident forced a global reckoning with how modern infrastructure operates. Every electrical grid, water treatment plant, and transportation network depends on networked computers to function efficiently. That efficiency creates vulnerability. The challenge for defenders is protecting systems that were designed decades ago for isolated networks, now connected to the internet because that connectivity enables real-time monitoring, faster repairs, and lower costs. There's no easy answer, only difficult trade-offs between convenience, cost, and security. Here's what we know for certain. Hackers gained access to power company networks, took control of industrial systems, and intentionally cut power to hundreds of thousands of people. We know they deployed sophisticated malware designed specifically for this purpose. We know they disrupted communications to slow the response. What remains uncertain is the complete chain of attribution to specific individuals and the full scope of reconnaissance they conducted. But one thing is absolutely clear. This was a proof of concept, a demonstration that critical infrastructure could be attacked remotely. The 6-minute shutdown was both an ending and a beginning. Confidence level high. Critical infrastructure operators worldwide increased their cybersecurity investments following this attack. New protocols for network segmentation and monitoring became standard across the industry. Confidence level medium. Similar attacks will be attempted against other nations and sectors. The techniques and tools have been analyzed and can be adapted by other groups. Several subsequent incidents have shown similarities in methodology. Confidence level medium. International norms and laws around critical infrastructure attacks may evolve through diplomatic channels. However, enforcement in cyberspace remains extremely difficult, and attacks continue with limited consequences for perpetrators. Confidence level low. A significantly larger, more destructive attack could occur if attackers aim for permanent physical damage rather than temporary disruption. Most experts believe this remains possible but not inevitable, depending on strategic calculations by state actors. The 6-minute shutdown proved that geography no longer protects critical infrastructure and that warfare has moved into domains where most of us can't see the battlefield. But it also showed that recovery is possible, that defenders can learn and adapt, and that transparency about threats makes everyone safer. The invisible war over our power grids, water systems, and communication networks continues right now, fought by people you'll never meet to protect services you use without thinking. If you want to understand how countries are building cyber defense systems for the next generation of threats, watch our next documentary, The Ghost Battalions, Inside Cyber Command Centers Protecting Nations 24/7.